All right, everybody, welcome back to Cisco Packet Tracer Introduction course. Again, my name is Keith Gebhardt. So, we've talked about a lot about Packet Tracer already. We've been moving right on through. We started taking a look at the lab that we see sitting in front of us. By the way, if you don't have it open it up now. This is our layer 2 network, our local area network. We're only communicating through switches at this point. We also saw how we could capture the traffic going through. We've been briefly talking about broadcast domains and different layers of the OSI model, even though that's not part of this course. It's really just helping you understand what we're doing within Packet Tracer, so you learn Packet Tracer and what we're actually doing with the network. So a little bit of bonus material you're getting out of this. Anyway, what we want to do is set this lab topology up. So in this lecture, we could talk about layer 3 networking. Now, really, this layer 3 networking that we're going to implement is still going to be considered a local area network because we're not geographically separating these locations. You can think of this being like maybe like two different floors within an office building, and we're going to route them separately so we have multiple networks. So let's go ahead and take a look at what we're going to do. The first thing I want to do is go ahead and remove this circle, and I'm going to also click and remove this cable going between these two switches. Next, I want to rename these computers. Okay, so I'm going to click the name, and I'm just going to click here, backspace, and I'm going to do a 2.5. That's fine. And then this guy could be 2.6, and I'm still going to keep the 24-bit masks on these. Now, don't forget, this is just the name convention, right? This is like a visual aid, more or less. So we got to go into the desktop and change it right here physically, which will be 2.5. Subnet mask is still good. And now we need to go into the server, and again, IP configuration. He could be 2.6. Boom. Gorgeous. Gorgeous, I tell you. So now we need to add a router, and we could just simply add a 1941 router. And if we hover over the router, we can see we have a couple Gigabit Ethernet ports. Perfect. That's all we need. Nothing fancy. That's all that we're going to be required to need for this course. Okay. So now that I put the router up, we need to connect the router to each of these switches. So what I want to do is go to my connections, and from here we're going to use a straight through cable from the left switch to Gigabit Ethernet 01 to the router to Gigabit Ethernet 00. And then we're also going to do a straight through cable from the right switch, Gigabit Ethernet 01, to the right port on this router from Gigabit Ethernet 01. And again, I'm just keeping these consistent, just makes lives a little bit easier. So right now, looking at this topology, how many broadcast domains would you say we have? Well, let's draw it out. If I go ahead and click my circle here, fill color, and I don't know, let's use a baby blue. And in fact, I'm going to use a square, baby blue. I could draw a nice little square here, and then I'm also going to change this color to maybe a little bit of like a light yellow. I'm going to go try to match it up, just to keep it nice and neat. Go over this way, and that should be good. Grab my arrow, close this guy out, just reposition him. I'm not OCD, but I like keeping things nice and neat. So there is indeed what? Our two broadcast domains. Since we have two different networks, two different subnets, and we are separating them by that router, we have created a layer 3 network here. Now, when we get down to these guys, we are still communicating through layer 2 through the switch. So if he's communicating to the 1.6, he will still be communicating at a layer 2. But if we're trying to communicate through this broadcast domain into this broadcast domain to the 2.0 network, he is now communicating through layer 3. So I could also essentially say, just make a note here, layer 2. Well, let's do this. The broadcast domain, enter, and this will be 192.168.1.0 is the network ID. Okay, and this goes back to a little bit of subnetting basics to figure out what network ID is. Basically, network ID is the network ID of the subnet you are in. So since 1.1 is the first usable address for a CIDR notation of 24.0 would be the network ID. That's a little bit, again, beyond the scope of this. Let me see if I can copy this. Control C, Control V, beautiful. Just drag him over. And now I'm just going to rename him to, we could just say 2.0. So we have two different broadcast domains. Now I'm going to highlight all of this. You don't need to do this because I kind of did this just so we could visually see them compared side by side. Boom. Now over here again, this is going to be our layer 3 network, and it's still going to be a a local area network, again, because it's not being separated geographically from other locations. Maybe it could be, but in most general situations, we could think of this like first floor of an office building, second floor of an office building, or what have you, and it would still be considered local area network to that single building, maybe that single corporation at that building. They're leasing 2 different floors, etc. Now, opposed to this network, he is all about being a layer 2 network, and he is still considered what? A local area network. So that is the different representations. Also, he will also be a single broadcast domain, and he is also the 192.168.1.0 24-bit mask network ID single broadcast domain. So there you go, guys. Okay, so maybe if before you start going crazy into this, saving it, if you wanted to kind of set your lab up like I did, just close it out, reopen it, make a copy of everything, and then save it. Okay, so copy, it would just do this. You could do a Control-C, Control-V, and grab the highlighted computer. You could drag it down, okay, just like I did, and then save it, reopen it, and then you could work with me and build what I did over here. That's just an option, though. You do not need to do that. Control-Z to remove that, and this is our lab. This is what we're currently going to be working in. I'm just going to move all this over so it's a little bit more centered. Beautiful. So one other thing I want to point out to your attention now is, as you see, our link lights from the router to the switches are indeed red, meaning they are not operating. There is no communication between the right switch into the router or the left switch into the router, because, another note, right, switches, who remembers, a little testing of your knowledge, how well you're paying attention, out of box by default will work. Routers, okay, out of box will not work by default. All interfaces, let me put the caps lock on, all interfaces by default are turned off on a Cisco router. Boom. Couple more notes for you guys just so you guys could see them. Nice. So knowing that, in the next lecture we're going to go in and learn a couple basic routing configurations that we can make this actually work. We'll learn a couple base configurations, some different verification commands. Now, for the most part, most of the commands on a router will be the same for switches. Obviously, they are 2 different devices. They have 2 different purposes in their network. So there's a lot of different things we can do on our switches opposed to what we can do on our routers and vice versa. But for the base configurations and general navigation around the file systems on a Cisco device, they will be the same. But again, I did give you that coupon a couple lectures ago to take my Cisco iOS Administration Labs course. That'll go into a lot more detail on both of these devices. So you could take advantage of that if you'd like. I will see you guys in the next lecture.